So Casey and I have put in a ton of time in the last couple of weekends pulling out all the port lights. You can see here, we've got them all out and kind of getting them ready to prime. But one thing we are going to do is these rear two, so the back two of the four on each side, we're going to actually buy bigger ones. They're going to be a little larger, so we're going to gain about 2 inches of light. It'll just make the inside seem so much more airy. You know, it's an older boat, so the designs, they didn't really use the big port lights back then. See if I can turn some lights on in here. Hey, cabin lights. You can see some of the cushions I made. This is why I learned to sew. That'll be the new color scheme. We'll kind of modernize it a bit. So this is like a faux leather. But back to the hatches, the port lights. So when we pulled them out, they had used like liquid nail or something, so it ripped out a ton of the veneer when we were pulling them out. So we think what we're going to do is get to, again, modernize it. We're going to get a lighter colored veneer, and we're not going to do everything, but we're going to just this surface all the way down on both sides. We're going to make just that surface lighter, kind of like maybe a birch. Here's a sample. We kind of had something like that. I think it might kind of be striking. It'll be neat with the old school versus a little more modern. And to give an idea, here's the size of the frame of the new one. So kind of go a little wider. So that's how big the new port lights are going to be versus that. You can see they're about 1 inch longer on each side, on each end, but they won't make any difference structurally to the boat. It'll just make it like almost like you have windows in your house, you know, versus these tiny little slits that you have to look out. So this might be the first time anybody's seen the boat with a decent camera. But so here's a section that this boat, the floor was in pretty rough shape, so I sanded one section down a bit, just put a single coat of varnish on just to see if I could kind of bring it back, and it's actually pretty nice. So we think we're gonna live with it for a while. We're gonna just sand the whole thing, and then you see that though versus the section that's been done versus not done. But the veneer on the floor, the teak and holly, is so thin that when you sand it, it's pretty easy to go right through it down to the marine plywood that's below it. So I've been working on the electrical. We put in a Victron battery monitor. So now, right now, I'm running off the house lights. I've got all the cabin lights on. I've switched them out to LED bulbs, but they're still running right now. I don't know if the trickle charger's on or not, but they're drawing about 2 amps when all the interior lights are on with the LED bulbs, so not too bad. So I'll switch the cabin light switch off and back to 0. So yeah, 2.69. That's the only thing that was on. Got the layout a little closer for the sugar scoop. So now you can see basically the old style transom, but what we're going to do is we're going to build this out. So there'll be a nice platform here, and then this will actually come up to about here, and it'll kind of taper. So by bringing it up here more, it will help tie it in for strength. And then it'll come out like this, so it'll come back to about here. And it'll just make it look a little more uniform, like it was supposed to be, as opposed to just a thing stuck on the end. There's not enough grabbing strength of the fiberglass either if it's going to be biting onto just the bottom, 4 or 5 inches of the transom. So this will let me kind of come down. It'll feed in and it'll feather into here, I would say. So it'll help hold that line a little nicer so it doesn't look like something just cobbed on there. Another project, we got all the materials, but it's way too cold to fiberglass right now. So even when we have the barn warmed up, it's in the 40s or 50s. We just cleared out the rear. Sorry about that, the heater. So I'm just clearing out the rear anchor locker, the lazarette, just to see what's back here. I haven't actually gotten too detailed in here yet. But I'm gonna clean it all out. But you can see there's a lot of just crap, beehives, everything. But I want to check the through hulls, and when I build the swim platform, I'm gonna have to change my angle here. When I build the swim platform, I'm gonna have to replace that through hull, because that's where I'm gonna end up on the outside. I'm gonna end up glassing in. Attaching to that point after I grind it, so it's going to change the shape of the hull slightly there. So that through hull is going to have to come out. Going through, just looking at some of the other stuff. There's the manual bilge pump up here. And then there's a fuel fill and kind of a bunch of other through hulls, but I just want to clean it up a little bit and then see what I have to work with. Definitely don't want to replace this. Maybe glass it. It's been wet for years. I think its only real purpose is to just cover the steering quadrant so nothing falls in there. So maybe make it a little nicer. So I'm rebuilding that piece that you see over here. Had a lot of rot in it. Those are rudder stops. So that goes around the tiller or the quadrant for the steering. And those are rudder stops so that the rudder can't go too far, but it's been beat up and it's rotten. So we're making a new piece. I just laminated 2 thinner sheets together with epoxy, and now I'm glassing it to make it waterproof. A lot of mixing. I didn't make enough epoxy the first batch, so. This batch will finally be enough to wet it all out. We'll have to let it set up and then flip it and do the other side. This glass is way too thick. I used biaxial. I think it's like 16 ounce, and it's just too much. Man, come on. Luckily this isn't a structural piece, it's just kind of a cover. But I wanted to build it heavier duty so I didn't have to worry about it again. Let's see where I'm... Probably should have made a little more again and just let it flow out. Quit being cheap and skimp on it. This stuff's like $120 though for a bottle, so I'm trying to save a couple bucks and I end up doing twice as much work. Seems to always be how things are with boats. It's starting to look pretty good though. It's finally starting to wet out. Trying not to touch my camera. Get it all gross. That's all I need, just have epoxy all over it.